Okay, wonderful. So it is my distinct pleasure to help with this session on striving to become a department chair. We have 3 speakers lined up today, and I believe that we're on a little bit of a delay with our 3rd speaker. So I will introduce our first 2 speakers. Dr. Julianne Sosa is the Leon Goldman Distinguished Professor of Surgery and Chair of the Department of Surgery at the University of California, San Francisco. She is also professor in the Department of Medicine there and affiliated faculty for the Philip R. Lee Institute for Health Policy Studies. Her clinical interest is endocrine surgery with a focus on thyroid cancer. She's an NIH and FDA-funded investigator. She has authored 350 peer-reviewed publications, 80 book chapters and reviews. She has authored or edited 7 books. She's involved in leadership positions in many organizations, including the American Thyroid Association, the International Thyroid Oncology Group, and serves on committees for the NCCA, the American Association of Endocrine Surgeons, and is editor-in-chief for the World Journal of Surgery. She has a passion for mentoring the next generation of physicians. She has mentored more than 90 students, residents, and fellows, and was recently recognized by being inducted as a full member of the American College of Surgeons and Academy of Master Educators. So, welcome. Thank you for spending the time with us today.
Thank you.
We also have Dr. Mónica Verduzco Gutierrez. She's an accomplished academic physiatrist. She's professor and chair of the Department of Rehabilitation Medicine at the Long School of Medicine at University of Texas Health in San Antonio. She was previously medical director of the Brain Injury and Stroke Program at one of the top 3 U.S. News and World Report's best hospital for rehabilitation. Dr. Gutierrez grew up in South Texas. She then moved to Houston, where she earned her undergraduate degree at Rice University, her medical degree at Baylor College of Medicine, and completed her PM&R residency also at Baylor College of Medicine and UT Houston Rehabilitation Alliance. She has a clinical expertise in the care of patients with traumatic brain injury, stroke rehabilitation, and interventional spasticity management. During the COVID-19 pandemic, she has developed a post-COVID recovery clinic to aid in the rehabilitative recovery of patients with functional mobility and cognitive deficits after infection with coronavirus. Thank you very much, Dr. Verduzco Gutierrez, for joining us tonight.
Yes, thanks.
Tonight, this afternoon, for those in the West Coast. And our 3rd speaker is going to be Dr. Alfredo Quiñones Hinojosa, who I don't see has joined us yet. I will introduce him for the brevity. Dr. Quiñones Hinojosa is a consultant and serves as chair of the Department of Neurologic Surgery at Mayo Clinic's campus in Florida. He is recognized with the distinction of a named professorship, the William J. and Charles H. Mayo Professorship. He leads NIH-funded research to find cures for brain cancer. His cutting-edge research focuses on brain tumors, cell migration, healthcare disparities, and clinical outcomes for neurosurgical patients, in which the operating room is used as an extension for his research. He has authored numerous high-impact scientific journal articles, chapters, abstracts, and books, and he continues to provide mentorship to residents, graduate students, and fellows. So we will welcome Dr. Quiñones Hinojosa when he joins us. I'd like to, again, thank you, and we're going to start off by actually asking each of you to share with us how you became chair of department. If it's okay, Dr. Sosa, we'll start with you.
All right, so thank you so much, Dr. Romero Arenas. I've known Dr. Romero Arenas since she was an applicant to fellowship. I remember interviewing you. You made a huge impact on me then, and I'm thrilled, and it's a privilege to be introduced by you today and to call you a colleague and friend. And I'd like to thank the organization and the course for the privilege of participating. Maybe I'll start by reintroducing myself in a way in which I sort of think of myself, because I think my mom thinks of me in the way that I was just introduced, but I don't think of myself in that way. I sort of introduce myself with disclosures. And when I talk about disclosures, I don't talk about like financial disclosures and conflicts of interest. I think about like who I am and how I define myself. So I think, and you can see with the banner behind me, the Zoom background, I think probably the first professional identity I have is as a surgeon. But then I think, how do I think about myself personally? And so I think probably the first thing I think of myself is as a cis woman. So I have my pronouns, and at UCSF, we always introduce ourselves with our pronouns. So I'm she, her, hers. I would say the next personal identity I have, which obviously crosses into the professional sphere, is as a Latina. My mom is Canadian and my father is Guatemalan. And so half my family is in Guatemala. And I used to go to Guatemala very frequently until my uncle disappeared. And so I've not been back to Guatemala now for more than 25 years. I think of myself as an immigrant. I was born in Canada and I spent my childhood there and moved to finish high school in New York. I also define myself as a member of the LGBTQ community. And I would finally say that I'm unafraid. And I think it is really important as a chair and as a leader to be unafraid and to try to deploy and use power. Not that I have a ton of power, I'm probably middle management at UCSF, but to deploy power on behalf of the disempowered or underempowered. I think, I'm really aware of my intersectionality. It's played a role in how I came to be chair. And I don't feel like it is baggage in any way. I actually find intersectionality incredibly empowering. And as chair, I think it is empowering because it allows you to perhaps more easily understand and empathize with a greater variety of different perspectives. I think just as I have a pretty intersectional identity, I think my path to becoming chair has been incredibly long and tortuous. And so I guess if the shortest distance between 2 points is a line, I certainly have never taken it. I don't know what that is, a line. So I was born in Montreal. I grew up in New York, went to college in New Jersey, spent 4 years of my life in England, spent then medical school residency and fellowship in Baltimore, then spent 11 years of my early faculty career in Connecticut at Yale, moved to North Carolina for 6 years at Duke, and then finally came to California 3 years ago. And I would say that for the first time in my life in San Francisco and in California, I feel personally and professionally home. And I guess, we were asked to talk about this path to becoming a chair. So I have really taken a non-traditional path in academic surgery. I started planning to do a PhD in economics before I went to medical school, and wrote a book in labor economics about the labor market for PhDs in the arts and sciences, and figured out based on my projections I wouldn't have a job. So I went to medical school. I chose a medical school because it was the only medical school that didn't require the MCAT. Then I was going to go into internal medicine up until September of my 4th year, when I had put off my surgical clerkship too, because I was convinced I was going to be an internist, and I loved it. And after 3 days, I changed career paths, and I decided to pull my application from ERAS and go into surgery. Then I trained in residency to be a hepatobiliary surgeon. And after doing that for 3 years as a faculty member, realized I hated my life and I hated what I was doing, and recreated myself as an endocrine surgeon. So again, I would say serendipity is a really powerful force. And I think it is incredibly important throughout all of your career, including through your early and mid faculty stages, to have an open mind and to be open to different things. I was never a division or a chief or vice chair. I sort of skipped over that. And I rose to become chair from being a section chief and as a scientist, from leading the solid tumor therapeutics program at a cancer center. So I think you can really approach being chair through many different paths. And I think that's really important. But I guess I wanted to sort of end this introductory section with some takeaways that I would hope that maybe be a launching point for our discussion later. So the first is, it is important, I think, to want to become a chair because you want to be a chair, not because your parents told you to be a chair or your colleagues say it's the only path, but it has to be what you want to do. And I will tell you, in American surgery, there are a lot of people who have what I call the chair disease. They want to be a chair because that's the right path. And it doesn't matter where they are chair, they just want to be chair. And they wind up in places that are very strange to me when I know the place and I know the person, and I'm like, why are they chair at that place? That's not really who they are. And I think for them, it's about being chair. And they've said to me, oh, I wanted to be chair, and yeah, this isn't the perfect job, but it's a stepping stone to where I ultimately want to go. And while that may in fact come true, there's an equally good chance you're going to finish your career at that place where you may or may not be happy. And so not only do you have to, in your heart of hearts, want to be a chair, but I would say you need to choose the place that is the right place for you to be chair. The best person in the world may not be the best person for a particular job. And so you could say, well, how did you wind up being chair at UCSF? And I'll finish with this story. And I remember interviewing for internship when I was a medical student. I remember going to UCSF. It was like it was yesterday. And I remember interviewing with the chair, Nancy Asher, an icon of American transplant surgery and the first woman chair at UCSF. And I remember flying home to Baltimore and thinking, my goodness, what a mystical and magical place UCSF is. They have this really amazing, they have a woman chair. This is unheard of. And, so many years later, I couldn't be prouder to be the second consecutive woman chair. And what that meant to me is so much more than being a first woman chair, right? What that said to me is UCSF is a place that is truly committed and has been for decades to diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice, where pride matters and we live by pride values every year. And it is the first time in my life that I feel personally and professionally home. So as you think about being a chair, make sure you are prepared for it. And I think we're going to talk about what being a chair means, and that you choose the right place for you to lead. Thanks so much.
Wow, what a way to start this off. There's so much to continue the conversation. I'm going to actually ask Dr. Verduzco Gutierrez if you want to share with us your path, and we'll retake some of the points that Dr. Sosa has raised.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I like to introduce myself by I like to tell a little bit about my story, about where it all, started. So at the beginning, if you heard us chit-chatting, I was talking to Pedro, we were talking about, we're from the Valley, but when we're from the Valley, it's not like the cool California Valley for those West Coast people. We're talking about the Rio Grande Valley that's not even a real valley. There's no mountains, there's no, okay, there's a river. And grew up there on the border. I told people, where I lived, it was, you could 10-15 minute drive straight from my high school to Mexico, and then it was actually safe to go. Now it's like, no, don't go. But growing up there, my family, we were like lower to middle class family, but no one was in medicine. My family were the ones that kind of grew up, or they grew up very poor. They picked cotton, and they got some education, and they wanted the most for their kids. They wanted their kids to do more than they did. They wanted their kids to have as much education as possible. So when I was a bright student, they just were like, I don't cook, I don't do that kind of stuff, because it was all right with my parents that I focused on my studies and my activities, because they want, education was so important for their kids. And so I was like, naturally, I looked up to the physicians that were around me growing up. I looked up, to our pediatrician and our family medicine doctor. So I was going to go to medical school. And thankfully, yes, I did very well in high school. I was very, very lucky to be in the Rice Baylor program. So it was one of those direct entry programs, because when I went from small town McAllen, Texas to big university where everyone was like, well, first it was culture shock, because I was in like everyone's Latino, to this very diverse place where everyone is really, like, I thought I was smart. No, everyone was really, really smart. And so, I'm very thankful for having that kind of program to get me into medical school as well. When I was in college, my grandfather, who was in the Valley still, had a stroke, and no one's in the medical field. No one knew what a stroke was, what a stroke entailed, what happens in the outcome, that they're supposed to get rehab. And he went from having a stroke to going to a nursing home and spent the rest of his time in a nursing home, which is, not very, Latinos are about taking care of their family members. And all I can remember is, I knew nothing about medicine at that time, except, I took a biology class, because I was an undergrad. And, but knowing that whenever we went back to go visit him, that he was there in a nursing home. So come years, and also I went into medical school thinking I was going to be a pediatrician, because that's all I knew. They say you can't be what you can't see. So all I knew was like, oh, I saw my pediatrician. That was awesome. That's what I wanted to be. And, I love, like, I'm not dissing any pediatricians, but once I went into medical school and then found, my passion, and, was very happy to find PM&R, and then find, neurorehabilitation, which is what I do, which also was very much thinking about what my grandfather going through and having a stroke, and then wanting to go into neurorehabilitation as well. And so, very happy to get to that point. I got married in medical school. Did my residency, kind of decided on residency based on still, wanting to have a family and knowing that our family was in Texas. So stayed in Texas for that. So these were the kind of decisions that I was making while I was going through this. But again, not having that medical background, not having family that was in academia or anything like that. So not knowing about the opportunities for going into academia and moving up along that kind of pipeline. And I think just when I had 2 kids in residency. And so that was like my PGY2 and PGY4 year. And yeah, that's not always looked upon favorably, but thankfully at the end of that, still got a job. And I think it was just like, okay, I got a job in academics because it was one that they needed someone and I could get a job. And I really looked up to my attendings, especially ones who were kind of doing it all and, balancing career in their life. And so it was like, okay, I was happy to have this job. So when I went in even to academia, I was just there to like, okay, I'm here. I'm a good worker. I see lots of patients. I'm bringing in all the RVUs. I was like the best clinician, like every year that I was in attending, I had the highest RVUs of everyone. but still getting paid low because, that's what happens a lot when you're a Latina junior faculty. And so, and not knowing a lot about, what is the course to move up from, okay, you're an assistant professor. I was an assistant professor forever before I kind of realized like, oh, we need to be moving, I need to be moving up. And I will tell you that one of the people that really helped like me move up, before I was at UT Houston, is Pedro Mancias, who was already a professor of child neurology there, who was also one of the deans in the diversity and inclusion, to say like, hey, you can do it. We need more Latinos to like move up. And we had done a course where we had gone down to the Valley, and we had taught they were kind of the prime program students medical history taking, and listening to his story. I was very, very inspired by that. And so this was also me saying, okay, well, I'm going to have to work on this now and to move up. And there was also another interesting thing. I was like, oh, we have some time, I'm going to talk a lot. That one of the faculty in my department said, oh, our faculty is so diverse. And I said, okay, we have a diverse faculty because, yeah, there's like some Puerto Rican guys, and there's me, and, there's one Black female who, of course, left. But it's not inclusive because the only people who are full professors are 2 Asian men. And then everyone else is pretty much at the assistant level. And so that was one thing that was like, okay, well, now what is it going to take for us to move up? And then we found out, okay, these are the protocol. This is what it takes. I went to go see the dean of faculty affairs, and you take them your CV and they look at it and they say like, okay, what are your chances? What do I think? And so he looked at mine and he said, oh, I'll give you a 50-50 chance of like moving up. So, and then my colleague, the other guy, he went also to talk to that faculty affair deans, and he looked at his CV and he was like, oh, I give you a 50-50 shot. Well, guess what? He went for it and I did it because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna make it because it's only a 50% chance and I don't like those odds. And so I did it. And he did go for it because, a lot of times the guys will go for it if they don't meet all the criteria. And did he get it? Yes. Did I get it? No, because I didn't go for it. And of course, it was like, okay, yeah, the next year I did. And I was a lot more ready that year because I wanted to be perfect. I wanted to be like the 100% person. So yes, okay, I finally made it. Very, and at that time in PM&R, there was only 8 Latina associate professors in the whole country in PM&R. And that includes Puerto Rico too. So the number, it's not that diverse. The numbers are really low. So that was something that was very inspiring to me and that's the data with the AAMC. Like, thanks for having that data. Cause to me, it gives me like an extra, fuego to keep on going, put my little pilas on and keep on, firing it up. And, so also the other thing is that I'm I'm a hard worker and I say a lot of yeses, and I'm willing to do we are in a kind of a smaller department, but in a really reputable rehab hospital. So there was a lot of opportunities for leadership positions. And I'm just kind of one of those okay, I was in one place yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. And, someone left and it was oh, I guess I'm the next highest person. So, okay, I'll be the medical director of the brain injury program. Okay, I got this vice chair position of, quality, patient safety, and did all that kind of stuff that goes with that. And, I guess I'm the fellowship director now of brain injury because now I'm the, associate professor that does brain injury. And, got a credentialed ACGME, a credentialed brain injury program. And, so I'd done all this stuff. And then I thought okay, I'm happy here. I'm doing well. Yes, maybe I want to move up. Maybe I want to be a chair, but I'm really happy with my life here that I have. And so then an opportunity for a chair position came up, and it was in San Antonio. And I was I love San Antonio. It's closer to home in South Texas. And it's a patient population that I love. And so I took this as the opportunity to say, okay, well, the chair position opened up and I got an email, and the email said, oh, you have to be a tenured professor to apply. I was not a tenured professor. I already told I was just an associate professor. And then I was like, why would I apply? But then I had to put back onto that mindset of okay, well, maybe I don't meet all the criteria, but guess what? I've been a medical director. I've been a fellowship director. I've been the chair of the faculty senate at our home medical school. I'm the vice chair of the department. Like I do diversity, equity, inclusion work. I meet every single criteria otherwise. So I was like, and what's to lose if I don't become chair? So, eventually went through all of this, and yes, now I'm the chair. And then was also with that came with, they looked at my CV, and I was able to also become professor, and also only the third Latina professor in the whole country of PM&R. And so it's something that a lot of it was like feeling that I had to do a lot of things, but then believe in myself ultimately.
Wow. Congratulations, both of y'all. And I do say y'all still because that's a Texas thing. I can't let it go. It just comes out naturally. So I'd like to ask you, I love that you highlighted each of you, your background and your heritage. I want to ask if you have faced any unique challenges that you think are related with your Latino Hispanic background. And by the same token, are there any advantages that you've encountered from that? Dr. Sosa, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I have to honestly say, in all of my training, I'll go back all the way to elementary school, maybe. I'm not sure I encountered in Canada, upstate New York, a Latino or Latina mentor, and definitely in surgery, I never had that. I've been blessed with 4 mentors in my life, which probably is a lot. I think there's excess of bad mentors and sponsors and a paucity of good ones. So I've had 4, all 4 were men. I have not been blessed with a woman mentor. 3 were white, 1 was an African-American man, and perhaps the most influential one. So I would say I didn't have that. I will tell you that, for me, coming to UCSF was my dream job. And in life, I think you have to have a finish line, and you have to go for that finish line. You can't take your eye off that finish line. And it is that for many reasons. One, as I told you, it was meeting Nancy Asher, seeing a woman in a leadership position in American surgery, which was exceptional. But a second, being very frank, was coming to California. And I think one of the reasons I feel at home in San Francisco, the Bay Area, and in California is that, more than 50% of California's population is, Latino, Latina, right? And for me, that is exceptionally important. So is this identity an incredibly important one in my personal and professional truth? Absolutely. And I will tell you, and Dr. Romero Arenas, you know this, but since becoming chair, and I have really made it my highest priority to actively and intentionally diversify our department. And I think we have been very successful in many ways, and I think we have many opportunities in many ways. But one of the ways we measure diversity, at least for the future, is the youngest, right? Like new recruits to faculty and new recruits for residency. And this year in our internship class, 75% of our class, this is unheard of in American academic surgery, is women. And 58% are underrepresented. And all but one of those are Latino and Latina. And so where is our opportunity? There are so many dimensions of diversity. And I am succeeding in one probably that is easier for me, that I understand. And it sort of goes to implicit and unconscious bias, right? But where do I have, and we have opportunities, it is where maybe our intersectionality is more challenged. And that might be for recruiting more African-American, Black faculty members and recruits. So it is clearly a part of my identity. I think it is empowering in many ways, but still I have to actively and intentionally grow in other ways. So that's, I think, the way I would answer your question.
Thank you for that. And congratulations. That's a huge win. And I know several of the students that were recruited to your internship class. So I know that they're very talented and highly coveted applicants the last cycle. Dr. Gutierrez, what would you say you faced in terms of challenges or any advantages from being Hispanic, Latina from the Valley?
So I think I said some of the challenges were just like not knowing the ropes, not knowing the course, not having maybe the right like mentors, sponsors for myself in moving up this way, not having all the privilege that maybe some other people have to, okay, shadow this doctor, do this, go to this. Oh, have you thought about going this way? And so maybe those are some obstacles in starting. The other thing are obstacles in how people may see you. Oh, you know, being a Latina woman, oh, is she more, you know, is she spirited? Is she bossy? Is she, you know, loud? Is she, you know, whatever may come with that. And then sometimes even, you know, as a leader, then there's questions of like, oh, she's a Latina woman. Does that mean that she wants to get rid of all the men, you know, and she just wants to make this place so diverse? And so those are maybe some obstacles or some things that I hear. But of course, I feel that there's a lot of benefits to being Latino, Latina, Latinx, and being a chair. I think, you know, we bring in diverse experiences, that we come from a place of community and making connections and having different backgrounds and having a lot of empathy from things that have happened to people in our community. And you know, part of what I see, you know, my grandfather was put into a nursing home. Then I look and I publish and look at data that says like Latinos are, you know, 20, 30, 40% less likely to go to rehab after they have strokes and brain injuries. And then now I'm in this position where, you know, I can work to do something about it and educate more people about it. So I think, you know, we're well faceted and looking at just beyond academia, but people and outcomes and our community. And so I think that's something that is really good for us. And then we do have that on top of mind. I mean, that was, you know, also our intern class that started, we had, you know, 6 out of 8 were women. So I was like, okay, that's a start. Trying to make some changes. Working on other diversity.
Yeah, I want to piggyback a little bit off of what you said, and I think it's a little bit of an important point, because I think it's a diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice has been a huge topic this past year, and that's great. But I think there's also been a little bit of backlash in terms of people saying we cannot only prioritize the JEDI as we create a clever acronym for that. But what would you say, you know, as you mentioned, some of the criticism that you might hear is, are you only going to recruit now your own? Are you only going to focus on diversity? And one of the common questions is, well, what about just focusing on excellence and high achievers? How do you address that?
So if I can, don't start me now. So you just like revving me up, Minerva, here I go. So I was just, I won't say the organization, I was just at a professional society, a surgical professional society, an elite, and they like to use that word, elite surgical professional society, which is selective in its membership. And to their credit, they have a new diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, task force, because I think they want it to maybe go away soon. So I was on it, we were having a discussion, and somebody said, listen, we're talking a lot about diversity. It's very important. We should do these things. But I would propose we can really get at all of this by turning back to merit. And we need to really talk about merit. And if we stay focused on merit, the problems will go away. But here's the problem, right? Is that the premise of merit, as I understand it, at least in academic surgery, and I think in all of academic medicine, it is predicated on privilege, right? So, as an example in this society, what is membership in this society based on? Well, one of the criteria is based on number of publications, right? So you have two candidates, right? One candidate from a privileged background, went to all the best schools, parents are members of the board of trustees, has access to a lab when they're a high school student, has published many articles starting in college. And then you have the underprivileged person, maybe an immigrant, maybe a Latina who's worked her way through college, nights, weekends, has spectacular board scores, but has no publications. But the distance traveled is so much greater, right? If we use conventional measures of merit, the first person will get the job every time, right? The second person will not. And so fundamentally, I would argue, and I'm very interested in what Monica says, that we fundamentally have to get away from the idea that merit and diversity are traveling separately and that there is no intersection, right? But the intersection doesn't happen organically. I think we need to actively and intentionally redefine what merit means, such that they're like this, right? The Venn diagram has significant overlap. So that's my own take. And this is anecdotal, but it literally happened within the last 72 hours.
I think my take on this is making people understand that it isn't a pie where it's like, if I give this more piece of the pie to a Latina female, that means you're getting less of the piece of the pie. I think it's, educating that this is inclusion. That doesn't mean like, oh, you're out there. In some cases it might be that, but I think it means like, okay, there can be a lot of people at the top. It's not like at the professor level, there can only be one person at the professor level. No, I'm about how can we bring up as many people as possible to that level. There is not a limitation of how many professors there can be in the field of PM&R, but can I help by, what can I do to help people, especially ones that may not traditionally get the sponsorship and support that they usually do. And again, I care a lot about, like you talked about, like, what does it take to get there? What, the privilege that someone had to get them over here and all the right mentors and sponsors and NIH grants. And then knowing that, women don't get as much money for funding for research, especially, underrepresented ones. How am I expecting them to have as many as someone else who may have had kind of everything placed on a silver spoon for them, but they were still able to do so much with what they were given. So again, I've always liked to look at the whole picture and try to teach that there's space for everyone at the top.
Yeah, I think those are tremendous responses. And, and I think it's been such a hot topic this year. Thank you for being so candid about how you tackle these situations and acknowledging that they definitely are happening. I want to invite the audience to submit questions. If you have questions that you want to submit through the chat. We do have one more topic that we wanted to address, and that is, what are specific resources that people can look to in terms of getting to be a department chair, learning the ropes, developing the skills?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So first of all, I think advantaging opportunities like this, every opportunity you can take. And you have to actively and intentionally look for them and negotiate for them. And don't let interactions like this expire. So after this, and I don't want to speak for Monica, but I suspect she feels the same way, is I'll put my email, like find us out. Mentorship and sponsorship should absolutely continue. We live in a digital world now. Everything is done virtually. So maintain and curate relationships that often come from opportunities like this. I think I am a huge believer in practicing and having a fund of knowledge and a skill set. These people who say, learn it on the job, we all have to, nothing will prepare you for being chair. Nothing. And I'm talking about like the first day on the job, nothing will prepare you. On my first day, I started on April 1st, how appropriate, 2018. And I walked in and my first day, like the largest strike in California history began, a labor strike. And everyone is unionized except for the physicians at UCSF. And, you know, like, wow, I didn't take the course about how to deal with a strike. But I do think there's some things you can do. So taking leadership courses, everyone is different, and I've taken a bunch of them. And yeah, is there overlap? Yes. Do you waste a little bit of time and energy? Yes. But are they also somewhat different? Yes. So the ones I've enjoyed, AAMC, I took early mid-career. For me in surgery, unbelievable opportunity to network because there aren't many women in surgery. So I'm just like, I'm hungry to talk to successful women. And so for me, it was a great opportunity to meet friends and colleagues. And because they're not in my field, we don't compete. It's all like, hey, let me give you a scenario. Have you ever seen this? What would you do? ELAM, unbelievable, recommend it highly. Awesome networking. It's been digital the last year and a half. I would wait and try to do it in person because the opportunities to have meals and drinks and doing homework together is super good. Coaching. I'm a huge believer in coaching, and coaches are expensive. You can get a coach to negotiate a chair position. So, and I recommend doing that. Like if you get a chair position offered to you, before you sign, you need to negotiate, and a coach can help you do that. And once you are preparing and negotiate to have a coach as a chair. It's like any athlete. You could be Tom Brady, but Tom Brady isn't Tom Brady just because he eats weird things, which he does, but he's also Tom Brady because he has like an amazing coach, right? So I would do coaching. So those are a few things, but I got to tell you, and again, I'm interested in what my co-chair says, but I think there is nothing that really prepares you. And I think the things where the biggest gaps for me are, it's having emotional intelligence. I don't think I have that gap. I think I'm okay there. So emotional intelligence, strong understanding of finance, strong understanding of crisis management, strong understanding of bad behavior. That's where the emotional intelligence, crisis management, I think, is really, really important. And in the end, equanimitas. If you remain calm and thoughtful, you can manage change in a cadence that is appropriate. And I think leadership has fundamentally changed because of the pandemic. What it takes to be a successful leader today is vastly different than a year and a half ago. And that's where having a coach is really, really helpful. It's all now about change management.
So my answer is, so ironically, I also started on April Fool's Day too, April 1st, 2020. So April Fools, we're in a pandemic, you're starting, but it wasn't what you thought, including, oh, here's your chair package, you're gonna get all this stuff. And then it was like, oh wait, we don't have any money. Well, you're starting, but you can't do what you thought you were gonna do because everything's changed at a drop of a bucket. You know, everything was closed, no surgeries, no money, no rehab, no procedures, no everything. So it was like, okay, change is the only constant that we have. So it's definitely, and then also the type of leadership that I was going to come in and have, that also had to change from like, okay, I was going to be like, we're going to do this, we're going to bring in these people, yeah, we're going to build these things. And it had to go into like a different type of leadership style, I like a holding leadership style. Well, how can I support people during this time, this difficult time of change? But also to, what else helped me to get to this position and to be ready for it? So, look into your medical societies and see what kind of leadership programs that they had. I was like, did any kind that I could get through our medical societies? And they're a lot more popular now, and they have things starting at early career. And we had, our academy leadership program. And then we had we have a separate society for academic physiatrists. And I did their academy leadership program for that. And that one is very much help me connect with some of the leaders in the field, because they were the ones who were doing these courses and presenting to us and talking to us. I also made a big effort to make connections with those people in my field. So when I went through these courses, whoever was presenting, whoever was talking, I took vigorous notes. And at the end, I wrote them all thank you notes and said, I really appreciate what you said, XYZ. This is what I remembered and learned. And, then that put a face to a name for them, so that I had contacts for the rest of my career. So when I started going for these positions, I could go back and say, oh, I have some questions, as I need to make my vision statement, as I need to come up with a plan, as I need to make asks to the dean for when I want to be in this position as a chair, what should I be asking for? And I had connections. I also, was big about getting more involved in my national societies. And the national, sometimes you're like, am I ready to be a leader? But they support you a lot, because they have, the staff members to kind of support the time. So a lot of times you don't even have to put as much effort, because they're helping support you a lot. So that was nice. And having the support from the societies. And the other thing is that I would just be big about trying to meet people and connect with people. One of my stories that I tell people is, we were giving oral boards and we were flying back, and there was one of the chairs was kind of sitting kind of behind me, and I switched with the person next to him. This was before, when I was a junior faculty. So I could sit down and just get one-on-one time with this person to start, learning about them more, learning about, what it takes to be in that position, just making connections. And then he was someone later who helped me create a vision statement for when I became the chair that I am. So that is just, it's connections, it's people, it's working with your society. And then there's leadership programs, of course, through the AAMC that are excellent.
That's a great story. And what a odd coincidence that the joke was on both of you on your first day. Let's I did see a couple of questions in the chat box, and I know that Dr. Sosa, I saw that you were answering one of the questions asked specifically about being LGBTQ. Do you want to address that just for anyone who hasn't seen it in the chat?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I really appreciate someone asking it. It's I think the hardest biases and discrimination to call out are those that are under the surface and more hidden, because they're more sinister. People can disguise it, they can excuse it, they can allocate it to other things. And I think discussions around that dimension, if it's possible, are behind even those around being Latino and Latina. So I think they are real. I think they are profound. An example I would give you is last fall, as we went into interview season, I gave a talk, and within about 2 hours of that talk, I received 10 separate emails from medical students all over the country. They weren't together, they were all separate, asking me a simple question. They said, a piece of advice, can you tell us, should I, during my interviews, reveal to anyone that I am LGBTQ? And then they said, separately, 10 of them, I have been advised to absolutely not do that. And to me, to receive consensus advice to not be honest and truthful about who you are is a sad commentary on where we are. And, what I said to them, which is what I say to other people, is I think you do need to be forthright and honest, because life is too short, but also because if an institution or a microclimate is toxic, you need to know it sooner rather than later, because you shouldn't go there, right? And let people reveal themselves. We've been doing some research in this area, and there's going to be some national data published for surgery in the coming probably couple of months in JAMA Surgery. And my only observation is it is profound, the toll it takes on our learners around this dimension. And I will tell you personally, I think it continues well beyond graduation from residency. As the stakes get higher, the discrimination gets bigger.
Thank you for that answer, and I think that's definitely a very much needed advice, and something that definitely all our faculty can take back to their own institutions as you address this with your mentees, and the importance of that intersectionality that we really all have to deal with. Dr. Gutierrez, do you want to add any comments about intersectionality?
As at first, it's a concept that a lot of people don't understand. And again, just depends on the field that you're in and the acceptance. And I think right now, society is changing. When we look, specifically talking about maybe LGBTQ, so many more identify in the young community. I have my own child that does as well. And compared to, older generations. And I think that older generations are not as accepting as well for some of these types of intersectional identity. I've already heard some feedback. This is at another institution where they're saying there is a student who is dressing in clothing that may not be for their own gender, and then people judge them and people are upset, and their attendings don't understand that that's their own gender expression. And so that makes it for a very difficult time for that student on rotations, and then also how they're being judged. So I think we need to start, Jedi, making this education and these concepts and bring this awareness to the higher levels.
Definitely a lot of a long room to go with that, making progress. So I'm going to try to be observant. I know that our session is going to be coming to an end. I did want to share some resources, and we had prepared some slides for the session. So we want to remind everyone that becoming a chair, that paths are all different, and it is important to know yourself, what brings you joy, to believe in yourself, as you've heard from our speakers today. It's tremendously important. Find allies, find mentors, find sponsors, and definitely say a lot of yeses before you can say no. We talked about the advantages and resources. We talked about roles and responsibilities. And so it's important to set a vision and goals. These are not coming from me. So this is slides and material that came from our chairs. Setting a vision and goals. Some of the responsibilities include building collaborations, managing people at various levels, troubleshooting and putting out fires, inspiring people, being selfless, supporting your people. As was mentioned before, also big role in finances. There's different paths, and so know that there's no defined requirements. Here's our section on Mythbusters. There's no specific requirements to being chair, but there is emphasis on academic achievement, clinical excellence, your people skills, the research acumen, and new ideas. Definitely emotional intelligence and managing change are also important aspects for chairs of department. Use your background to your advantage to empathize, sympathize with others, to connect with patient experiences, to inspire a different group of people in the workplace. As you can imagine, you'll be role modeling in a very different way, and that's going to have a tremendous impact on people that perhaps didn't really look to leadership for that inspiration. And you can definitely engage with new communities that have previously not really been engaged with your institution. Live and learn. Everyone makes mistakes, and just learn how to handle challenging situations and move forward. And here are some resources. These will certainly be shared by the Lead That Is program after the session. And so with that in mind, I again want to thank everyone for attending today. Dr. Verduzco Gutierrez, Dr. Sosa, thank you so much to both of you for sharing your path, your stories, your challenges, and we really appreciate your time today.
So honored to be here. Thank y'all.
Thank you so much.
Well, let me just take a moment and thank everyone for joining this session. Special thanks to Dr. Verduzco Gutierrez, who proposed this session and served on our planning committee. So thank you so much for ensuring that this session was included. Thank you both, Dr. Sosa and Dr. Verduzco Gutierrez, for your leadership. I'm hoping that you will become deans or consider becoming a dean of a school of medicine or chancellor as one of your next phases. And thank you, Dr. Romero Arenas, who's one of the founders of the Latino Surgical Society. I think we're all in agreement that we look forward to you becoming a chair in very soon. So with that, I want to ask Dr. Ureste to step up, who will be moderating our next session. Thank you.